Today we'll talk about another case that has new developments and a trial sometime in the coming year, hopefully, that will receive a lot of media attention. We're going to ask you to help identify some folks, so please pay close attention to those descriptions and details. This investigation goes as far back as 1996, when Karen Vergata was last seen on Valentine's Day. More than 2 months later, partial remains, legs of a woman were found in a garbage bag on Fire Island, New York. She became known as Jane Doe 7 or Fire Island Jane Doe. She was not identified then, but 15 years later, in April 2011, skull and several teeth were discovered at Tobay Beach. DNA would link those remains to Fire Island Jane Doe. Later still, genetic genealogy would identify Fire Island Jane Doe as Karen Vergata, 34, from Manhattan. It's believed she was working as a sex worker when she went missing. The year after Karen went missing, in June 1997, the partial remains of another were found at Hempstead Lake State Park in Long Island. She was called Peaches, or Jane Doe 3. Peaches' torso was found in a green plastic Rubbermaid container dumped next to a road along the west side of the lake. She had a tattoo on her left breast of a heart-shaped peach, with a bite taken out of it and 2 drips of juice falling from its core. She was young and African American. 14 years later, the dismembered remains of a baby were found in a plastic bag near Jones Beach State Park. She was called Baby Doe. DNA testing would show that Peaches is the mother of Baby Doe. Baby Doe was 16 to 24 months of age and wrapped in a blanket. She was wearing gold earrings and a gold necklace, similar to jewelry that was also worn by her mother. Just a few days later, more of Peaches' remains were found nearby. When these remains first began to surface, they weren't connected. But in 2000, Valerie Mack was last seen sometime in spring or summer at Port Republic, New Jersey. She was living in Philadelphia and working as an escort. Later that year, in November, a torso was found in garbage bags that were dumped in some woods in Manorville. Then 11 years later, a head, right foot, and hands were found in 2011. The Manorville remains were matched by DNA to these remains, and she was named Jane Doe number 6. She was identified in 2020 as Valerie Mack. Mack and another victim were disposed of in similar ways in the same area of Manorville, suggesting that they are linked. That victim would turn out to be Jessica Taylor, who was last seen at the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan in July 2003. Like Valerie, her torso was discovered in Manorville. DNA would identify her, though, later the same year in 2003. The tattoo on Jessica's torso was mutilated by something sharp, likely to try to prevent authorities from identifying her or at least slow them down. Her skull, hands, and a forearm were discovered in March 2011. Like others, she was also working in the sex trade when she went missing. By now, authorities have linked some of the killings. If you can believe it, things would take an even darker turn soon. In July 2009, Melissa Bartholomew was last seen at her apartment in the Bronx. She was in the sex trade and advertised through Craigslist. From July 17th, for more than a month, a male used Melissa's cell phone to place phone calls to Melissa's sister, Amanda. The calls were vulgar, mocking, insulting. Eventually, though, the caller would stop, but not before telling Amanda that her sister was dead. Police were able to trace the calls as far as Madison Square Garden, Manhattan, and Massapequa. Melissa's remains were found along Ocean Parkway in Long Island on December 11, 2010. On May 2, 2010, Shanann Gilbert made a panicked 911 call at 4:51 in the morning from Oak Beach, Long Island. The call lasted 23 minutes. She's heard banging on doors trying to get help and telling dispatchers that, quote, "they are trying to kill me," end quote. She is not seen again after that. About a month later, police ask a dog handler to try to locate Shanann. He isn't able to come up with anything at that point, but he goes back, this time closer to the shoulder of the parkway in December 2010. And that's when he finds the Gilgo Beach 4. the remains of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. That day's searches did not locate Shanann. In June 2010, Megan, who was 22 years old and from Maine, was last seen at a motel in Waupage, New York. She was also advertising on Craigslist. And in September 2010, Amber went missing from her home in West Babylon, New York. She went to meet a stranger who had called her several times for sexual services. Maureen was last seen on July 9, 2007. She was from Norwich and told people that she had planned to spend the day in New York City. She was working as a sex worker and advertised on Craigslist, and she disappeared. After she disappeared, a male called her friend, Sarah Carnes, and said he saw Maureen. She was alive and staying at a whorehouse in Queens, and that was his word. He said he would call back with the address of the house, but never did. Carnes would tell authorities that she could not discern any regionalization in the man's speech, any accent. Maureen had told a friend that she was planning on meeting a client outside the Super 8 motel in Manhattan where she worked. When Jessica's remains were found in March 2011, a new search the following month would find Peaches, Baby Doe, and a body called Asian Male, along with more of Valerie and Karen's remains. The remains of Asian Male are unidentified. The person was found wearing women's clothing and so may have been a transgender woman. The person was between 17 and 23 years old and 5'6" in height. They were missing 4 teeth. They may have had a musculoskeletal disorder, which would affect how they walked. When they were discovered in December 2010, they were already passed away for between 5 and 10 years. That means that the person was likely missing in 2000 to 2005 and was probably born sometime between 1977 and 1988. So you're looking now at a composite of Asian male. Police were not sure whether they were dealing with one serial killer or more, but by November 2011, they believed they were only looking for the one person, and that person is most likely living in Long Island. Shanann would finally be found in December 2011. Suffolk County Police offered up a reward of $25,000 for information leading to the capture and arrest of the perpetrator. It would be 4 more years, and then the FBI joined the investigation. Apparently, James Burke, a former police chief of Suffolk County, blocked their involvement for years, but was indicted for civil rights violations and conspiracy in October 2015. So the FBI joined the investigation in December 2015. This was not the only issue that hindered the investigation for years. There was a lot of interagency friction, failures to cooperate, biases, and other issues that bogged down the investigation of and search for the Long Island serial killer, as he was then known. In 2020, police released pictures of a belt. They did not believe it belonged to any of the victims and thought the killer probably handled it. It has the letters HM or WH on it, depending on how you orient the belt. The police also went to the extraordinary length of creating a website, gilgonews.com, to share news and receive tips. Police linked 4 of the murders together, the Gilgo Beach 4, Maureen, Melissa, Megan, and Amber. Then they linked these 4 murders to 59-year-old architect Rex Andrew Heuermann. They allegedly have cell phone records, emails, and a vehicle linking Heuermann to these 4 cases. They have some mitochondrial DNA and internet searches, images of the victims and the victims' relatives. When he was arrested, police found 279 weapons, a majority of them unregistered pistols and assault weapons. He's been remanded into custody. Neighbors, of course, have expressed their shock and dismay at the media, that he was such a quiet guy. And how could such a quiet guy be arrested for such horrific offenses? There may even be a link to his wife, Asa, but both are innocent until proven guilty. And the link, which is mitochondrial DNA, her DNA that was found with some of the remains is more likely transferred DNA. That means, she's in the truck with her husband, and her husband then uses the vehicle to transport bodies, and that's how her DNA gets there. Sadly, Shanann's mother, Mari, advocated for her for years, certain that her daughter was taken by a serial killer and pushing police for what she believed to be their inaction. She would live to see her daughter's remains recovered, and as a result of the search for her, finding the remains of 9 others, but she would not live to see justice. Shanann's sister, Sarah, who was suffering from schizophrenia, murdered Mari in 2016 and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. We'll cover Mari and Shannon's stories in a different video. Unfortunately, the unidentified remains don't get much media attention. If you can help identify Peaches and Baby Doe and Asian male, please come forward. If you have a loved one that went missing near the relevant times, 1996 or 1997 for Peaches and Baby Doe, and 2000 to 2006 for Asian male, and they otherwise match the descriptions that you've heard, please consider coming forward. It may well be that 2 or more people are responsible for all of these murders. If Heuermann is guilty of the 4 Gilgo Beach murders he's charged with, he may have tried to copy the MO of the Long Island serial killer cases to try to avoid detection. That's a possibility as well. Copycats aren't uncommon, and the means by which many older cases were dumped were nearly all well publicized. Heuermann is only charged with the Gilgo Beach 4 so far, and remember, he's still innocent unless and until he's convicted. There are similarities with these 4 that don't match the others. If you have any information relating to the remaining people, please do not hesitate to come forward and say what you know. Their families also deserve answers and justice. There was a suspicion at one time that some of the victims, particularly the older ones, were killed by Joel Rifkin, who was another notorious New York serial killer. No matter what else might have been going on for all of these people, remember that they were people first, with families who loved them, children who needed them, and friends who missed them in their lives. Sex workers or not, let's drop all the stereotypes. They all deserve dignity and safety, and not a single one deserved to die at the hands of some monster. They mattered, and justice for them matters. Closure for their families matters. Please do what you can to help. If all of that isn't enough, there are a number of other possible victims that may be related to this case. Rather than make this video even longer, we'll make separate videos for each of the unsolved murders, each of the unidentified individuals. If you have any information about any of these persons, again, please come forward. It doesn't matter how old your information is, how small you think it is, how insignificant you think it might be. We never know what can help to solve a case. And thank you for listening. If you're enjoying these videos and want more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any videos. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.